your being is more like a play than it is like a collection of objective phenomena. And then what happens is the play itself, like a Shakespearean play, becomes a more accurate representation of being than a scientific description does. And it's because it plays out, it's because it accounts for behavior, and because it plays out the consequences of behavior from the subjective perspective, because a good play elicits the sort of passions and emotions and motivations that are subjectively experienced that actually characterize your life as you live it. So what that means is the play, a novel, a book, a story, is an abstracted representation of reality that's subject to just as much rigor in terms of conception as a scientific description of a given thing. And it's also real. Well, it depends on what you mean by real, right? Because we already found out what the scientists think of as real, but there's lots of arguments about that, because I might say, well, I would judge what you consider real by watching how you behave, not by listening to what you say about the structure of the world. And that's an existential perspective as well. And so then I would note that regardless of what all of you might say about what you believe about the nature of reality, it's certainly the case that you're going to act as if your own perceptions, your own subjectivity is real. So for example, if something hurts you, you can think all you want about how pain is not objective, but that's not going to get you out of the painful situation, and you're still going to configure your behavior so that you're going to do everything you can, even involuntarily, so that you will work to avoid that pain. And so you're stuck with acting as if your subjectivity is real. And that happens at such a deep level that it supersedes your consciousness, right? Like if you put your arm on a burning stove, you're going to take your arm away from that before you even think about it. So the reality in some sense of your subjectivity is so deep that you don't even necessarily have a choice about it. So one of the things that I've wondered for a long time is what happens if you take this sort of idea seriously, you know, that you need the knowledge that is constituted in stories because it tells you how to behave, and because you need to know how to behave, because that's actually one of the fundamental problems of life. It might even be the most fundamental problem of life. If, you know, from a scientific perspective, the most fundamental problem is, what are things made of? It's something like that. How do they interrelate? But just because that's a very well stated problem, and just because we've been able to produce profound and differentiated answers to it, does not necessarily mean that that is the problem that almost everyone faces. And it seems to me it's especially the case with people at your age. It's like, well, what am I going to do seems to me to be the fundamental problem. And so, and if the answer to that is, well, there's no real guidance for that, it's just something you have to figure out for yourself, then, you know, that's the sort of thing that makes you question the utility of knowledge per se. And I think it's a weak answer, and I also think it's a wrong answer. There is no shortage of information about how to behave, and there's no shortage of information about what happens if you break the rules of behavior. Now, there's arguments about what those rules are, and it's no doubt that they differ contextually. But just something can differ at one level of analysis and be the same at another. Languages are like that, right? I mean, we all speak a language. The languages are different, but they're all languages, which means they differ at one level of analysis and they are common at another. And how to act is like that too. And I think Piaget is particularly useful for thinking about that, because Piaget is the thinker who I think has done the most work in trying to understand how it is that there might be a basis for what constitutes morality. You know, and Piaget starts with the Shakespearean conception fundamentally. He believes that how to act is the problem. And, you know, we're embodied creatures, and we're very mobile, and we're very good at manipulating the world. We're very good at communicating. And so any psychology that doesn't take into account the nature of our embodiment is a very weak psychology. And Piaget basically says, well, look, you know, you come into the world with some potential for action. It's kind of minimal, but it's enough to get you going, right? It's enough to kickstart you in a sense. And then as you organize your body, and you're doing this neurologically, sort of from the spine up, as we discussed, the manner in which you organize your capability for action and perception is continually modified by your social interaction with other people. So your socialized being is built right into your motor circuitry. It's a pattern. It's not even a conception, it's a pattern. So for example, when you're breastfeeding, you have to do it in a manner that allows your mother to tolerate you. And so even something as simple as the first ways that you use your lips and your mouth, and the way that you express your emotions is immediately going to be modified by the necessity of social interaction. And social interaction can't just proceed any old way, right? So if we have a relationship and it becomes seriously non-reciprocal, you're a fool if it's non-reciprocal in your direction. You're a fool to stay with it. You know, there's something that's roughly like the expectation of 50-50. And that's well established empirically with experiments that you wouldn't expect to turn out that way. So those are the trading experiments, and I told you about them, I think, if I remember correctly. So the deal is, we'll play, the three of us will play. So I have $100, and you can have as much of it as you want, but you have to give him some, and he has to accept your offer. So I've got 100, how much are you going to give him? 30. Would you take that? No. Okay. Now, so what's been found everywhere is that people roughly center around 50-50. And so even if the amounts are quite high, and even if the people to whom the money is being offered are very poor, in fact, the poorer the people are to whom the money is being offered, the more likely they are to tell you to go to hell if you're not being fair. And so that's built in, and you think about that. Like, it doesn't take much more than that for morality as a system to get going. So if the rough expectation is reciprocity, where that's possible, then deviations from that reciprocity are going to be punished very harshly. And so right there you have the grounds for the emergence of a complex system of human interactions that's by no means arbitrary. Now, it might be, you know, altered to some degree by the particularities of the local environment. There's no doubt about that. But something can have a fundamental pattern and still be capable of, you know, a large number of variants. So